The room looked familiar, but everything in it felt wrong. The long mahogany table, the glass water pitchers, the leather chairs that creaked like they held secrets. This wasn't a family meeting. It was a war room dressed in wealth. Rowan stood in the doorway for half a second longer than she meant to, long enough for everyone to pretend they didn't see her. No one said hello. No one stood up. Not even her sister looked her way. 5 years. 5 years since her last deployment. 5 years since she walked out of this family's life. And now she was just another stranger to them. Or worse, a threat. Her father sat at the head of the table like a CEO, guarding his legacy. Her sister sipped tea like she'd already won something. Rowan didn't come for them. She came because her grandfather made her promise, show up, no matter how cold the room feels. So she did. And as she took her seat in silence, the only sound in the room was the soft rustle of legal paper. That's when she realized this wasn't just a will reading, it was an execution. The lawyer, Miss Halford, cleared her throat. The room fell still. Her voice was calm, controlled, almost too controlled, like someone reciting a recipe for destruction. "To Era Greavves," she began, "the family lake house, and the antique Steinway piano." Era smiled, smug, satisfied, as if she'd just been handed a crown. Then came Leonard. "To Leonard Greavves, a collection of first edition Hemingway novels, and a $10,000 donation to the American Ethics Council in his name." Leonard scoffed. "Is this a joke?" Miss Halford didn't flinch. She turned the page. And then the air in the room changed. "To Rowan Greavves," she said, "my granddaughter, my only confidant, I leave the remainder of my estate, all financial holdings, all property, and controlling interest in Braden Tech Systems." Silence. No one breathed. Then, like punctuation, she reached into her folder and slid a check across the table. $38,246,000. Rowan didn't move. She didn't even reach for it. But Leonard did. Like a snake striking, he lunged across the table, snatched the check from the wood, and in the same motion, pulled a silver lighter from his coat pocket. "You think this brings you back?" he growled. And then he lit it. The flame crawled across her name. The ink turned black. The air smelled like betrayal. Ara gasped. Miss Halford simply leaned back in her chair, as if this wasn't the first time she'd watched a man torch a fortune out of spite. And Rowan? She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just sat there and smiled. Rowan didn't say a word, not when the flames swallowed the check, not when the ashes drifted across the table like snow made of spite. She just sat there, still, focused. Because this moment had already been predicted. A month before Grandpa Marshall passed, they met at a diner off Route 7. The coffee was terrible. The pie was stale. But the envelope he slid across the table was heavy with something more than paper. It was sealed with red wax, the kind he used for birthday cards when she was young. Formal, final, sacred. "Don't open this," he told her, "unless they try to burn everything." He didn't say if, he said when. So now, as her father's rage still clung to the walls, as her sister sat stunned, as Miss Halford calmly watched the last embers fade, Rowan's fingers slipped into the inside pocket of her coat. The envelope was still there, warm, waiting, just like he said it would be. She didn't rush home. She drove in silence, windows up, radio off. The air felt heavier than it should. Rowan sat at her kitchen table that night, opened her laptop, and typed in the login for her bank account. Username, password, security code. Error. She tried again, slower this time. Still nothing. Third time, she double-checked everything. This account no longer exists. Her stomach dropped. She reached for her phone and called the bank. After minutes of being transferred, a bored-sounding rep finally answered. "I'm sorry, Miss Greaves," he said, "but this account has been flagged as inactive." "What does that mean?" Rowan asked. A pause. Deceased. Silence. A sharp, unbearable kind of silence. Not because it was untrue, but because someone had made it true on paper. She hung up, got in her car, and drove to the DMV. She stood in line behind a woman arguing over a $20 parking ticket. When it was finally her turn, she handed over her ID. The clerk frowned, tapped a few keys, then looked up with a face Rowan would never forget. "Ma'am, our system says you're legally deceased." "I'm standing right here." "I know, but the system doesn't." That's when she understood. She hadn't just been cut out of the family. She'd been erased from existence. Rowan didn't sleep that night. She pulled out every document she had: passport, birth certificate, military discharge papers. They were all real, all hers. So how had she died? She drove back to the county registrar's office in the morning, asking for a copy of the death certificate. They gave it to her. Her name was there, her birth date, a cause of death that didn't exist. And at the bottom, 2 signatures: Leonard Greaves, Era Greaves, her father, her sister. The same people who had smiled at her across the table less than 24 hours ago. She felt her chest tighten, the air grow thinner. But it didn't stop there. Attached to the form was a medical affidavit, signed by a licensed physician, a doctor she had never met. It stated that Rowan Greavves had suffered severe post-combat mental instability and was likely delusional regarding identity and inheritance matters. Her hands trembled. This wasn't just theft. This wasn't about money anymore. They were erasing her from existence. Not by accident, not by incompetence, by design. And the people behind it were the ones who were supposed to protect her. She waited until the apartment was dark. No more phone calls, no more fights. Just silence. Rowan sat at her kitchen table, same spot where she learned she was dead. Only now she had something that felt more alive than anything else in her life: the envelope. She slid her thumb under the red wax seal. It cracked like a door opening to a past that never stopped loving her. Inside, a single typed page, a USB drive taped to the back, and at the bottom, her grandfather's signature in clean, deliberate strokes. The paper was short, legal, a trust transfer form fully notarized and dated 3 weeks before he died. Everything had already been moved. The check they burned was never the real inheritance. The money, the properties, the control over Braden Tech, all already transferred. Then she plugged in the USB. No password, no folder names, just one video file. She clicked it, and there he was. Grandpa Marshall sitting in his sunroom, golden light pouring over his shoulder. He looked thinner, tired, but his voice clear as ever. "If you're seeing this, Rowan, then they did exactly what I feared most. But I want you to know I didn't leave you unarmed. I didn't leave you alone. They'll try to erase you, but I left you the truth. And in the right hands, Rowan, the truth can burn louder than any fire." She needed someone ruthless, but righteous, someone who could navigate legal minefields and wasn't afraid to step on a few. There was only one name on her list: Sylvia Vaughn, a lawyer who once sued the Pentagon and won. Rowan found her in a brick-walled office above a boxing gym. No receptionist, no marble floors, just case files stacked like fortresses and an espresso machine louder than her voice. "I don't do family law," Sylvia said flatly, barely glancing up. "Good," Rowan replied. "This isn't a family. It's war." That got her attention. Rowan handed over the USB, the notarized trust transfer, the death certificate, the forged psych evaluation. Sylvia read in silence, then leaned back in her chair. Her eyes didn't blink for a full 5 seconds. "They didn't just try to steal your money," she murmured. "They tried to bury you alive in paperwork." And so it began. They started mapping every forged signature, comparing handwriting samples, flagging discrepancies. They tracked the doctor who signed the fake medical report. He had filed identical reports for 3 other dead veterans. They filed subpoenas, contacted notaries, pulled security footage from the courthouse. This wasn't just fraud, it was a machine built to erase inconvenient heirs like her. But now that machine had a problem. Her name was Rowan Greavves, and she wasn't dead, not even close. The folder was thick, pages of signatures, contracts, share transfer documents, all signed supposedly by Rowan Greavves. But something felt wrong. Sylvia brought in a forensic document examiner, a former intelligence analyst. Not cheap, not friendly, but honest. He spread the papers out like evidence at a crime scene, pulled out a magnifier, ran scans through software used by the FBI. Then he froze. "This isn't a real signature," he said, adjusting his glasses. "It's a print overlay, digitally inserted." "Inserted from where?" Sylvia asked. He turned the screen toward them. "From her military discharge papers. Right here." He zoomed in. The same pressure points, the same ink breaks, the same jagged pause at the G in Greavves. They had stolen her name, not just legally, not just financially. They stole the weight of her service, her sacrifice, her uniform, her dignity. They used the name she earned in war to rob her of the life she built in peace. It was more than fraud. It was desecration. Rowan knew the courts could take months. But public outrage, that only needed one headline. She called Nash Wilder, a war reporter turned investigative journalist, known for exposing corporate corruption, military cover-ups, and for never, ever backing down. He answered on the second ring. "You're the vet with the fake death certificate?" "I'm the vet whose family tried to kill her on paper," she replied. That was enough. They met at a diner outside the city. Nash showed up with a battered leather satchel and eyes that didn't miss a thing. She handed him the flash drive. The trust documents, the death certificate, the forged psych report. He didn't take notes. He recorded her, all of her, every detail, every date, every betrayal. Then he asked one question. "You ready to go public?" "I was ready the moment they set my life on fire." 2 days later, the story dropped. Dead soldier walks into courthouse with evidence family declared her insane to steal $38 tech fortune. It hit 3 million views in 6 hours. By the end of the week, #JusticeForRowan was trending worldwide. News anchors debated her case on live TV. Veterans groups came to her defense. Thousands shared stories of similar betrayals. Rowan was no longer invisible. She was a spotlight, and the truth finally had a microphone. When truth starts to burn, liars reach for gasoline. Leonard Greavves went on national television. Polished suit, sympathetic lighting, a fake tremble in his voice. "My daughter, she's not well," he said. "She came back from war, different, paranoid, angry, unstable." Then came the footage. Grainy, desaturated, a shaky camera in a combat zone, a raid on a village, children crying, a house on fire. "There was an investigation," the anchor said solemnly. "No charges were filed, but the trauma remains." What they didn't say, that Rowan wasn't even present at that location, that she reported the misconduct, not caused it, that the fire was set by local militia, and she was the one who pulled survivors out. But truth doesn't get applause in primetime. Scandal does. And just like that, Rowan's name trended again. But this time, with hashtags like #unfitvet, #GreavesScandal, #liar-in-uniform. Sylvia slammed the laptop shut. Nash looked like he'd swallowed fire. "They just handed us their biggest mistake," he muttered. Because in their panic, they aired something they never should have touched. A moment Rowan had been keeping silent for years. And in that silence lay the final proof. They thought they'd buried her with a lie, but the truth? It was still breathing. Sylvia walked into the newsroom like she owned it. No press release, no dramatic speech, just a flash drive. She handed it to Nash Wilder. Play this. Everywhere. And so they did. The clip was short, unpolished, grainy video from an old camcorder. But the voice? It was undeniable. If you're watching this, Rowan, they've done it. They've tried to erase you. But I left you everything, not just the money, the truth. The internet shattered. Reddit exploded. Veteran forums turned furious. Twitter tore Leonard apart. Disowning a soldier for profit? Gaslighting your own daughter? He should be investigated. Within hours, Braden Tech issued a public statement. All accounts linked to Leonard Greavves are suspended pending investigation. By midnight, every major outlet changed their headline. She was right. Video proves $38 million inheritance was real. Leonard's lies fall apart in 58 seconds. The tide didn't just turn, it became a flood. And this time, Rowan wasn't drowning in silence. She was surfing on truth. At first, it was 1 email, then 5, then over a dozen. Former employees of Braden Tech. Names Rowan didn't recognize, but they remembered her. We saw what they did. We stayed quiet because we were scared, but not anymore. They forwarded files, encrypted, time-stamped, legally dangerous. Internal memos, signed transfers, wire instructions, authorization forms, all tied to 2 names, Leonard Greavves, Era Greavves. They had been rerouting company funds through shell corporations, faking board approvals, even forging entire meeting minutes. Rowan stared at a scanned check, made out to a luxury real estate holding in the Caymans, signed using her name. This wasn't just betrayal, Sylvia said. This was an organized financial crime. And the evidence? It was no longer a whisper. It was a flood. The silent ones finally stood up, and their voices were thunder. The courtroom was silent. Leonard sat with his lawyer, eyes watery. Era wore black like it was a funeral. Maybe it was. Rowan didn't flinch. She wore her uniform pin, the same one they tried to erase. Sylvia stood before the judge. Your Honor, we present Exhibit A through G, a falsified death certificate, a fake psychiatric report, internal emails coordinating fraud, and sworn affidavits from 12 whistleblowers. The judge flipped through the files. No expression, just wait, like each page landed with thunder. Then came the final request. We'd also like to play a video left by the deceased Rowan's grandfather. The judge nodded. The lights dimmed, a screen lit up, and there he was, Eli Braden, sharp-eyed, calm, unblinking. If you're watching this, Rowan, it means they tried to burn you. Your name, your truth. But I raised you better than to vanish in smoke. So here's how you return. His voice was a torch. Rowan looked across the aisle. Leonard was pale. Era trembled. The judge leaned forward. And in that moment, the courtroom didn't need tears. It had proof. It started with a whisper. Ara turned to Leonard, eyes wide with panic. You said the documents were destroyed. You promised they'd never find it. Leonard's jaw clenched. His lips didn't move, but his glare said it all. Shut up. Sylvia leaned slightly forward, eyes fixed on the judge. Your Honor, with the court's permission, we rest our case. Silence. Then, the verdict. In light of the overwhelming evidence, Rowan Greavves is the sole legal heir to the Braden estate. All financial, corporate, and legal assets are to be restored to her effectively immediately. Furthermore, the court finds sufficient cause to open a criminal investigation into the actions of Mr. Leonard Greavves. Boom, Era gasped. Leonard's fist hit the table. You backstabbed me, he hissed to her. You leaked the files, didn't you? But Era didn't answer. She was staring into nothing. Rowan stood still, not smiling, not crying, just breathing. For the first time in years, breathing like a woman no longer erased. The gavel fell. Court adjourned. No one clapped. No cheering. No music swelled like in the movies. Just silence. The kind that meant something had finally ended. Leonard was escorted out. Ara followed, head bowed. And Rowan? She didn't cry. She didn't smile. She just stood up. Slowly. Deliberately. Like she'd been rehearsing this moment every night for the past decade. No words, no revenge speech, just presence. For years, they denied her a place at the table, erased her from papers, photos, family dinners, and the future. But now, she was undeniable. The judge nodded quietly in her direction. Sylvia squeezed her shoulder, and Rowan walked out of that courtroom not as someone who won, but as someone who survived and reclaimed her name. Rowan didn't buy a mansion. She didn't fly first class around the world. She didn't post a victory speech. Instead, she filed paperwork, hired staff, met with counselors, caseworkers, social workers. And on the steps of a modest brick building, she cut the ribbon, the Greavves Foundation. Not a monument to her pain, but a sanctuary for others still trapped in theirs. Its mission? Provide legal aid to women veterans wrongfully denied benefits, offer free trauma counseling and job training, build safe housing for survivors of military abuse, fund lawsuits for those too scared to fight alone. Rowan walked the halls, shook hands, listened to women who had been silenced, dismissed, gaslit, and she told them, "You're not broken, you're not forgotten, and you will never be erased." She wasn't rebuilding her past, she was building something no one could burn. Rowan had won back her name. But what about those who never got the chance? The ones who were written off, locked away quietly, buried by bureaucracy. That's why she created Operation Second Voice. Not a PR campaign, not a charity stunt, a mission. For every woman denied benefits because her trauma made people uncomfortable. For every veteran dismissed as unstable instead of heard. For every son, daughter, mother, or friend labeled too difficult to deserve justice. Operation Second Voice offered media advocacy training for survivors, microgrants for legal battles, anonymous helplines that didn't hang up after "I'm a vet," and roundtables, actual seats at the table for those once shut out. Rowan didn't stand at a podium, she sat with them, not as a savior, but as someone who'd been erased too, and now she handed them the mic. There was no press release, no TV crew, no photo ops or hashtags, no Rowan Greavves Day, no gala, no speeches. Just a woman in jeans, at a folding table, reviewing another application from a veteran trying to stay housed. Just a counselor wiping away tears as a mother of two finally said, "I'm not crazy. I just needed someone to listen." Just a girl who'd once tried to disappear, now training others to speak in rooms that once rejected her. Rowan never chased legacy. She built dignity. And dignity, she learned, didn't need an audience. It just needed to be real. It was just a coffee shop. No cameras, no lawyers, just two sisters, a chipped table, and one conversation 7 years too late. Adara had tears in her eyes before Rowan even sat down. "I didn't know they'd take it that far," she whispered. "I was scared. I didn't know how to stop it." Rowan stirred her tea. No raised voice, no dramatic speech, no throwback to childhood. Just, "You chose a side," she said quietly, "and now you have to live with it." Adara reached out, but Rowan had already stood up. And as she walked away, the only sound left in the cafe was the clink of a teaspoon and a sob that never quite reached the air. She didn't hang her name on a billboard. She didn't buy a penthouse or hire a PR team. She walked into the county clerk's office and re-registered her name, Rowan Elise Greavves, CEO. No parade, just a line of people waiting for birth certificates and vehicle titles. But she smiled. Because it wasn't about reclaiming power. It was about reclaiming existence. Rowan leased a dusty warehouse, painted the walls herself, hung up pictures of women in uniform smiling exhausted whole. She called it the Reintegration Studio. Each room had a name, courage, return, voice. And each week she dialed numbers, one by one. Women who had served, women who had been ignored, broken, shut down. "This is Rowan Greavves," she'd say. "We're building something for you. Not for profit, not for pity. But because you deserve to come home." And when someone asked her why she didn't put her name on the building, Rowan just smiled and answered, "I didn't build it for me. I built it for people like me." There were no reporters, no ribbon-cutting ceremony, no applause. Just Rowan standing alone outside the building she built from ash. In her hand, a final certificate. Legally restored, financially whole, but most importantly, undeniably herself. She looked up, not at a banner. Not at a crowd, but at the sky. Wide, open, unclaimed. Then she whispered, not for anyone else to hear, but for herself. "They tried to burn me. I didn't disappear. I became the foundation for something they can never erase." And with that, she walked back inside. No stage, no encore, just a life, finally hers. You don't need to be accepted to exist. Sometimes the people closest to you are the first to erase you. They'll rewrite your story, silence your voice, and bury your name like it never mattered. But Rowan proved something powerful. No one can burn down your worth unless you hand them the match. They tried to take everything from her, but she didn't just survive. She became the foundation for something they could never destroy. Let this be a reminder. Even if the world refuses to see you, you still have the right to stand, to speak, and to rebuild. You're watching Through Her Eyes, where the stories no one dares to tell finally get a voice. If this story hit you in the heart, if you've ever felt silenced, erased, or unseen, click subscribe. Here, we don't tell fairy tales. We tell the real stories, the ones that hurt, that heal, and that remind you you matter, even when they say you don't. Turn on the bell so you never miss what's next, because one day you just might realize that your story deserves to be told too.